I'm Joanna Garzilli. You're watching Life Stories. Today, my guest is JJ Virgin, celebrity, nutritionist, and 4 times New York Times bestselling author, including the book, The Virgin Diet. JJ, welcome to Life Stories.
You know, I just feel smarter just hearing the accent.
Thank you. So speaking of accent, where did you grow up?
This is why I have no accent. I grew up in Berkeley. I was born in San Francisco, grew up in Berkeley, which is a great place to grow up because you grow up just open to every culture, you know, every religion, and you have really good food. The farm to table, I think, really started there.
And do you have siblings?
I do. I'm adopted. So I have my adopted family. I have a sibling there. I have an older brother. And then in my birth family, who I met, I have 2 half-brothers and a half-sister.
And so, what was that like growing up?
Well, I didn't know any of them. I grew up, I thought, growing up, I was always told I was adopted, so I thought that my birth mother was Barbara Streisand. I was totally sure of this, because we have such a resemblance, and I sing so well. And I never got along with my adopted brother, so that was not good. He actually has schizophrenia, so that's probably why. So I grew up with a beautiful mind going on in my house, in the basement. But you know, it's very interesting when you're an adopted kid. They talk about adopted kids having something called a primal wound, and you'll get this now as a mom. Like, there is a thing that you have with your children when you give birth to them that I'm not sure can be the same with an adopted kid, where you've got this connection that will just not go away, right? And I think as kind of an adopted kid, I sort of felt like I was the puzzle piece that didn't fit into the puzzle in that whole family.
So did you know who your birth parents were? I mean, I can't even imagine.
Well, here I am, I'm adopted. So my parents are the people who had to put up with me and raise me, right? Who had to put up with me as a teenager. Like, they paid their dues. So they are definitely my parents, and they really did an amazing job with what they had, and they're amazing dad and mom. I didn't go and find my birth parents until I was 25, and here's what's so bizarro crazy about this. At the time, I was married to my first husband. His ex-wife was a fitness instructor, a blonde fitness instructor of German descent, who was also adopted. Had
Wow.
a type, right? And so we actually went and searched together to find our birth parents. And when I met my birth parents at 25, I remember walking into the airport, and that was back when you could actually walk through security and meet somebody, and I looked at this woman. She had my haircut. She was wearing the same outfit, like down to navy, you know, jeans and a white shirt and a brown belt and brown shoes, same haircut. I'm looking at her. We looked like sisters. And I met her. She was a teacher for A Course in Miracles. She traveled all around the world doing, you know, humanitarian work. Amazing, very much of a gypsy. My birth dad was a self-made multimillionaire entrepreneur. And the family on that side were models and athletes. So all of a sudden I kind of went, oh, I get, like, this makes a lot of sense. And it just shows how strong nature really is, because I am so different than my adopted family, like in every way.
What was the first question that you asked to your real parents?
Well, you always want to know. I did it under the guise that I wanted to find out my medical history, you know, if I wanted to have kids, especially growing up with a brother with schizophrenia. I wanted to find out what was going on in my family. But the reality is, I wanted to know, like, why wasn't I with them? What had happened? And so my mother was engaged to my father. They were in college, final year. Apparently they were the couple at college in Oregon. And my mother, she was like, you know, obviously her first man she'd ever had sex with, like, second time, she gets pregnant. And so he didn't want her to have the baby because it wasn't the right time, and wanted her to drink quinine. I guess that was what happens back then. So wanted her to drink quinine. She left and went to San Francisco and moved into an unwed home for Catholic mothers.
Wow.
A crazy story. What a strong woman. And it's funny because growing up, I grew up in Berkeley, but I went to acting school in San Francisco, so I would go just roam the streets. That's how I would calm myself down. Turns out that's what she did when she was pregnant. It's so crazy when you start to learn all these things. Anyway, so she gave me up. I was born at San Francisco General. So is my husband. He was born there too. I mean, like, what are the odds? So it's really crazy when you see. I know it's not crazy to you. I know you're not remotely surprised about any of this, but the synchronicity of life is amazing.
So what would you say is the greatest gift from having been adopted?
You know, I was reading this book. I have a buddy named Philip McKiernan who wrote this book called The Last Talk. And the first quote from him is, it's beside your greatest wound lies your greatest gift. And one of the things that I've gone out and done because I didn't feel connected to my adopted family was to really create, I was like, well, what if you could just choose your family and really build a community? And I'd say that going through that has made me like such a focused community builder. So that is such a huge gift from it. And that's the right question to ask. You know, I don't want to ever sound like this, oh, poor me, I was adopted. No, I mean, how amazing when you look at it with the right lens.
And you have a very large community globally.
Yes, I have a big family.
So what was that one, if there was one core quality that you wanted people to experience in the community that you have created, what would that be?
Generosity. So in my community called Mindshare, which is all the health experts and entrepreneurs and doctors, the whole through line is a rising tide lifts all boats, with the belief that if you are a go-giver and you go out and help other people and you can collaborate in a place where these people were like, when I first started bringing them together, like, wait a minute, they're my competition, you know. And what we've now done in that community has created more New York Times bestselling authors, more TV stars, $50 million in book advances, like crazy stuff. But bigger than that is that goal of reaching 1 billion people and helping them be healthy. That's what's happened by that collaboration. And that all happened from this, like, I want to have people around me who inspire me, who lift me up, who challenge me to be a better version of me, who don't just go, oh yeah, no, you look great. That's just great what you're doing. You know, that would look and go, you're doing that, but I know you can do better.
So tell me about, you're 4 times New York Times bestselling author, which is no small feat. So what happened right before that? Where were you at in your life?
So it's very interesting. It's like, that's the feat actually is what happened with my first New York Times bestselling book, because the craziest part of all of that was that book was launched from a hospital bedside with my son in a coma. All of that happened because I just wanted to reach more people, and I wanted to make sure that someone getting to be healthy there was never that limitation of money, you know, that you could make all of this accessible to everybody, that you couldn't have someone say, oh, I would love to do that, but I can't afford it. It's like, well, yes, you can buy a book or rent it, you know, get it from your library. So I knew when I sat and worked with the Virgin Diet, because it kept coming up again and again, that the whole concept of food intolerance. Back then no one knew it was, but this idea that food you could be eating every day could actually be hurting you, and you could go through a process and figure out which foods worked for you and which foods didn't. And I had this amazing agent. She helped me put this whole thing together, and we were like a month out from launching this book, and I had invested everything. The advance, I borrowed money, I was all in, and I'm a single mom at this point, and I am the full financial support for my kids. I'm the one that's paying for everything. And so this thing, you know, has to be a big book. Like, it has to go, otherwise I'm gonna have a problem. A couple weeks before, I think it was like a month before this book is supposed to, all the launching is supposed to start, my son was out crossing the street. He was 16, my other one was 15, so Grant was 16, crossing the street, gets hit by a car. We still don't really know what happens, because it was a hit and run, where a woman got out of her car. The neighbor came upon the scene right afterwards and saw a woman get out of her car, gas, get back in her car, and speed off. And when we got to the first hospital, they told us to let our son die at 16. And we overruled them and got to the next hospital. He was airlifted to the next hospital.
What was your first feeling when the hospital told you that? And then what was the energy that came up that gave you the drive to be able to say that is not going to be the case?
Not on my watch. You know, it's so interesting. It's why we have to work on our mindset every single day, because when something like this happens, and here's the thing, it's going to happen. Things are going to happen to us. We know that. There's no one gets to escape these things. And in fact, all I've seen is that the more successful someone is, the more stuff they've had to deal with. And it's how you show up that changes everything. Fortunately, I had been working on my mindset for decades. And because I had my other son, both my sons, that's how they rolled too, and so did my ex-husband. So we're standing around, and what was so interesting is they first told us that, and we're all in the conference room listening to this, and my son says, well, I guess I'm an only child now. And I thought, well, at least he had a girlfriend. At least he experienced that. And then I went, it was like, stop it, you know? And we started to really look at what was going on. And I actually walked outside. And I walked outside and I stood outside and I just got very, very quiet and still and present. And I thought, it was really like, okay, what do I do? And it was more, what does Grant want me to do? What does Grant want me to do? Because maybe he wanted to go, you know, and wasn't it really his choice? And so I went outside, did that, and I got this like massive hit, massive intuitive, like fight for him. I walked back in, and Bryce, my 15-year-old son, because the doctor goes, well, you know, he's never going to survive an airlift to the next hospital. He had a torn aorta. It was going to rupture sometime within the next 24 hours. But he also had multiple brain bleeds. And you couldn't do that type of surgery that he needed. It was very specialized, needed to be done in LA. And he also had 13 fractures, like literally bones sticking through the skin. It was crazy. Never get that out of my mind. But he said, you know, he'll never survive an airlift to the next hospital. And even if he did, he wouldn't survive the surgery. And even if he did, he'd be so brain damaged it wouldn't be worth it. And my son Bryce looks at this doctor and said, so like maybe a 0.25% chance? And the doctor says, sounds about right. He goes, well, we'll take those odds. And that was like, you know, full warrior mom in there going, okay, what are we going to do? We're overruling you. Now, my ex-husband's a medical malpractice trial attorney. Like, so I knew the head of UCLA Healthcare. We all just went like full on into this mode of doing this. And, you know, I think in life, all you have to do is have that teensiest bit of hope. All we needed was anything more than zero, right? The minute he's not brain dead, there's a hope. And how could you not do everything you could in that situation?
So how long was he in a coma for?
He was in a coma for a couple weeks, and then he was in the hospital for 4.5 months. He would have been there longer, but we pulled him out. And you know, I've always been fascinated by comas and near-death experiences. I didn't really actually want to get this close to one, but it is incredible what all those things you read about in the books that's what we lived through. Grant had the gray man come down and ask him if he wanted to live or die. I was sitting in the hospital next to him, launching my book. In the hospital next to him. They gave me a room to do interviews, and I'd just talk to him all day long, tell him what I was doing.
So you'd be with him by his bedside, and then you'd be going and doing some
I'd bounce
TV
out and do interviews,
radio interview.
Get back there. Yeah, it was. At the time, I was just in complete like autopilot. I had only 2 things. I took everything else off my plate. Well, I had 3. I mean, the 2 obvious things were son, book. Because I needed the book to go to be able to do everything I was going to need to do for my son, to have my son get to be 110%, which is what I vowed to him. I go, you are going to be 110%, and this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you and all of us and everybody else who we can touch. So those were my pure focuses. Now, above that, I realized that the only way I was going to be able to pull those things off is if I put myself first. And this is an important message, especially to moms. Because I've noticed that we tend to put ourselves, because sometimes we don't even make our to-do list. Like, we're not even on the list, right? But we're definitely not number 1. And I knew that I couldn't walk into that hospital if I was sick. They're not letting you into an ICU when you're sick, like you're not there. I had to put on gloves and a gown and a mask. And I knew that I couldn't make the decisions I was having to make for him unless I was like, game on. So I actually put my self-care above everything else. I got 8 hours of sleep. So all those people saying, oh, I don't have time to sleep. I'm like, I had time to sleep while launching a New York Times bestseller, bedside, taking care of my son in a coma and making sure my other son was okay. So yes, you do. And I was eating well, and I was actually exercising. I found a Whole Foods, I found a gym. Whole Foods actually started sending me food.
Before they had delivery, right?
Yes, before they actually came over with things for me. Because they saw me posting all of this, because I posted all of this on Facebook because I needed support and help. And I also knew that it could support and help other people, because I didn't want anyone else, if I could help it ever, to have someone say, oh no, you've got to let them go, when there was still a glimmer of hope. You got to fight, right? But I did good food, supplements, exercise, eating. I did all of that, and that is how I was able to do this.
What would you say then? Because someone may think, well, that's fine for you, and how are you able to do that? How did you get to the point where you said to yourself, I can get myself that sleep, I am going to put the right food in my mouth?
So this is why it's so important, because I thought about this later. I thought, gosh, what if I hadn't have walked into that with very high stress tolerance to begin with? What if I hadn't walked in with a really positive mindset I'd been working on for decades? What if I wasn't in great health? And for so many people, I work in weight loss. What do people tell you in weight loss? I'll do that tomorrow, right? And I kept thinking, we've got to realize that you taking care of yourself and your health and your mindset can be the difference between someone you care deeply about living or dying, that it's not selfish, that this is really your gift to the world, right? And so I was already fully there, thankfully, when I walked in the door. And that's the inspiration, hopefully, for anyone watching to go, okay, what step do I need to take today? It's not, today isn't the day to go, okay, now I'm going to start sleeping well, and I'll eat well, and I'm going to exercise, and I'll start meditating. No, pick one and get it to be a habit, and then add the next and get it to be a habit, so that when rough times show up, you've got your arsenal, you've got the tools in your toolbox, and you will be able to handle it, because that's what I had to use to save my son. I had to manage my mindset so carefully, because everything around me was saying this kid would never make it.
At this point in your life, who would you say is the wind beneath your wings?
I have a couple wins. Are there winds? Is there wind?
Wings.
A lot of wings. I was going to go.
The wind beneath your wings.
The wind beneath. So I have a couple people who are giving the wind to my wings. Obviously, my children are huge for that. They inspire me every day, and my husband. And then I think that we're always best when we have a mentor and a group. And so the woman who inspires me so much, who I aspire to be 1% of who she is Mary Morrissey. I think she is just like, it's like an angel incarnate. She is just amazing. She actually married my husband and I.
Beautiful.
It was incredible. I was like, oh, I can't believe I didn't videotape this, because everyone got married again in the audience. Everyone, it was just that. It was so amazing. So yeah, she's incredible. And then I also have a group of women. We call ourselves the Unicorn Club.
I love that.
Who get together to lift each other up, to support each other, and really to hold bigger visions for each other when the world's all around there telling you, you can't do that, right?
So speaking of that, I could talk to you all day. My last question is, and you've already done so much, what do you want to be remembered for?
It's very interesting, because what we put into the Unicorn Club is to live your legacy. Everyone talks about leaving that legacy. I go, what if you live it every single day? And where I've really gone to in my career now, obviously the single most important legacies for me to leave are my children. And I'm happy to say Grant now is 110%. He's better than before the accident. So now I'm really helping manifest that next big vision for him. And Bryce is going to change math as we know it on the planet. But my biggest legacy beyond that is really helping 10,000 doctors and health entrepreneurs live their legacy and build their dreams so we can impact those billion people. That is what I've been focusing on every single day, is helping them rise up.
Amazing. I'm Joanna Garzilli. You're watching Life Stories. Today, my guest was JJ Virgin. Tune in next time.